Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd just like to acknowledge our gathering this afternoon on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish people. I welcome you all to today's agenda. If I could just ask that you turn your electronic devices on to vibrate or off, please, while we proceed with the agenda. And welcome, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first item of business is a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion carries. Thank you. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item M1, Community Services Committee meeting minutes of July 10th, 2019, and the recommendation before you is that the minutes of the Community Services Committee meeting of July 10th, 2019 be adopted.
I have a mover and a seconder. Any discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion carries. Thank you. Ms. Legault.
Item M2, Special Community Services Committee meeting of August 14th, 2019, and the recommendation is that the minutes of the Special Community Services Committee meeting of August 14th, 2019 be adopted.
Moved Director Stone, seconded Director Smith. Discussion on those? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion carries. Thank you. Any business arising?
There's none.
That brings us to the public input period. And the procedure is on the electronic devices on the walls. You have 15 minutes. Sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. I'm Cliff Evans from Shawnigan Lake. Mr. Chair, on the agenda on R2 today is a request to waive park dedication fees for a proposed 5-lot subdivision of Lot 26 in the Elkington Forest, that's by Stebbins Road. The report states, in 2007, a rezoning application for Lot 26 was approved. Park amenities were committed to the CVRD. It was understood at the time that these contributions would include any subsequent subdivision of lands, but this was never said. I can't find it. A covenant was registered in 2010, but the statement for waiving future subdivision was not in it. The intent was always that it would be waived, but it wasn't there. Intent is not good enough. It would have to be passed by the board. I don't see any correspondence to back the intent up. There was another Elkington Forest hearing in 2013, specifically dealing with some of the lot zoning for Lot 26, and there wasn't any mention of waiving amenity fees on Lot 26 for further subdivision. There was plenty of statements of the amenities, though, and that would be given to the amenities that would be given to the public. But other than the land donated, I haven't seen anything. I haven't seen a parking lot and a covered washroom shelter next to the couch and trail, nor the promised fire hall or sewer system. If the amenity fees are waived, there will probably be many more to come, as there is 950 acres sitting idle in the Elkington Forest. Please give consideration to deny waiving the amenity fees for any future subdivision of the Elkington Forest properties, or at least defer the application for further study. We must note that Goldstream Heights has to pay amenities for subsequent subdivisions. Should the Elkington Forest be treated different? I think not. And by the way, Lot 26, Stebbins Road, is online for sale, asking $2,250,000. Say they get $2 million for it, a 5%.
I'm sorry, Mr. Evans, that's 3 minutes.
2 more seconds. The 5% amenity would be 100,000. So the amenities that the CVRD is asking is a deal at 52,250. A trail would also be nice as an amenity for your consideration today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Evans. Any further public input? Would you come to the mic, sir? Thank you.
Hello, folks. My name is Larry Jorgensen, and my wife Millie and I, we've been longtime residents of Shawnigan Lake. This Elkington Forest, I'd like you to refer to R2, which is the same item that Cliff Evans has spoken about. This Elkington Forest saga has been going on for well over 10 years. And what the amount of money that the Parks and Trails Committee is recommending is that they waive the $52,000 plus per lot, or for the total of 5 lots in the subdivision. The covenant that was signed by both parties, the CVRD and the original owners and managers of the Elkington Park forest area, did not include this item, even though they say, and it's written in your notes there, that there was intentions, there were email exchanges, and there was correspondence and that. But as it stands, the covenant does not include it. There is no reason whatsoever to waive our cash. If you extrapolate those 5 lots into the 100+ lots that are set up for the Elkington Forest area, we are talking of waiving nearly a total of $1 million for the Shawnigan Lake residents. 5 lots, over 100 lots potentially, it's $1 million. We can't afford that. We simply cannot continue to cater to special interest groups, no matter how well-intentioned they say they are. Now then, I'm requesting that you deny this application and, at the very least, refer it to your legal counsel for him to review the covenants, review the history of this Elkington Forest outfit, because as far as I know, they are either A, insolvent, or B, have gone through a bankruptcy and a reconciliation. I can only find, and Cliff cannot find very much more information than I, in that I believe one of the principles of the original Elkington Forest has bought out, or the other partners have waived their interest in it. We don't even know right now who this developer is of these 5 lots.
You have 10 seconds, sir.
Okay, so if you pass this precedent of waiving $50-some-odd thousand, you're actually, over the next number of years, giving up over $1 million of Shawnigan's money potential. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Any further public input? Seeing no one coming to the mic, we'll move on. Ms. Legault?
Thank you, Chair. Delegations, item D1, Drew Cooper, Cowichan Sportsplex regarding Sportsplex Fieldhouse project, and the recommendation is for information.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, Mr. Cooper.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to visit with you today. My name is Drew Cooper. I'm the Executive Director for the Cowichan Sportsplex. I'm also the Executive Director for Pacific Sport, and we're the organization that's been responsible for working, collaborating with the CVRD Recreation Department and my good friend John Elzinga on the Play Cowichan project. And over the last 4 years, due to the support from the regional district, this project emerged as one of the flagships among the 50 or 60 such projects that exist in communities across Canada. And as a consequence of that, this project also is being sought out by funders for pilot projects as these opportunities emerge. So I bring this up to kind of demonstrate that there's actually three hats that I wear: the Sportsplex hat, the Pacific Sport hat, and the Play Cowichan hat, which really kind of morphs into some giant sombrero. And at any given time, there's 2 or 3 of those interests at play in the things that I do. I'm here today to seek $75,000 towards a $1.5 million fieldhouse project, which represents about 5% interest in this. It kind of sounds like a Dragon's Den pitch, but it's not. As folks may be aware, that it was announced that we successfully got some federal fundings to advance this project, and I really want to acknowledge Mayor Sebring and his crew for the leadership in securing this huge grant, which is going to be a real game changer for the facility and the community, as I hope to demonstrate here today. So if we flash back to '96, the Sportsplex broke ground. The track was phase 1, and over the next 23 years and $8 million of further investment through a lot of fundraising and public funding from organizations like the CVRD, we now have a 26-acre facility like you see on the screens here. A fieldhouse facility has always been part of this vision for this place, and so we're very pleased that this opportunity has finally looked like it's going to arrive. We've been in, I think that one of the things that I've recognized in my short period, I've just been with the Sportsplex for a little over a year, and one of the things I quickly came to realize that it's not just a sports destination, it's also a community, something that's very valued by the community. And I think that as evidenced by the Aboriginal games that were hosted a number of years ago and the consequent kind of coming together of the Aboriginal and non-Indigenous communities, we're proud that much of this of the games was hosted at the Sportsplex, and we can feel a part of this kind of transition. I've been in the not-for-profit sector for about almost 30 years, and in that time I've had to beg and plead for volunteers to step up and be part of boards. And so needless to say, I was blown away when last fall we had four director positions open, and we had 5 applicants. And I'm used to being down on my knees begging friends, families, acquaintances, strangers to come and step up. So we have a very passionate board, and they've really taken on the challenge of securing this field house with a lot of hard work. I do want to speak in terms of our values, mostly to the innovation piece. I could speak much more, but innovation really is the key. Over the last year, one of the things that I've tried to do is see how we could operate a little bit differently, do things a little bit more creatively. How do we look at maybe bringing programs in as an additional revenue stream? And as a result of some of the tweaks that we've done to how we operate, groups like the Fall Softball League, men's and women's, we've seen 50% growth in the number of teams that are now participating there. In some of the community events that we're doing, like the Show and Shine, the attendance more than doubled because we did a minor thing like just allow folks to come with their pets. So it's things like that we're seeing some real movement and growth in what we're doing. Here's the current state of affairs. The facility that you're looking at is the original portable that the staff was housed out of. It is been condemned. So it's no longer accessible except for short periods of time. So we have, basically it's used as a washroom facility, a little bit of storage for records and the like. We currently operate out of this 270 square foot Britco trailer, which is adequate for about 3 workstations. We have at times between 5 and 6 people trying to work at it there when we have summer staff, volunteers, practicum students, and the like. Here's the solution. This is artist rendering of what we're proposing. 5,000 square feet, 2 stories, 2,500 square feet on each, would comprise of change room facilities, four change room facilities, men's, women's washrooms. Can I do a pointer thingy? No, I can't. There's a LGBTQ and or officials change room, office space, team meeting rooms, and a reception area on the main floor. Upstairs, we're looking at everything from community meetings to receptions with a capacity of between 70 to 85 or so people potentially, with kitchen and hosting opportunities as well. Okay, so here's the numbers. We're looking at, I said, about approximately $1.5 million project. We've got $1 million coming to us. The Sportsplex is committed to and raised and committed to $194,158. So that's partly from our capital budget as well as fundraising that we've done. And then we're looking at local government to match that. And again, thank you to North Cowichan for their commitment of 95. We're looking for the balance of approximately $100,000 to come from the CVRD and the City of Duncan. 75,000, as I mentioned, from the CVRD. So in terms of benefits, we're talking about $1 million infusion from outside of the community and a total of $1.5 million of direct economic activity. I think that's fairly significant in terms of some of the spin-off that happens. And we really want to see ourselves and be seen as an economic driver within the region. This is going to result in local construction jobs. It's going to result in local procurement. And I really want to speak about the event hosting. So right now, because we don't have the change rooms and the other hosting abilities, it's rather difficult to host tournaments, championships at the provincial, regional, national, and potentially even international levels. We do figure that if we were able to host 10 tournaments, we would drive a significant amount of dollars into the local economy. One 16-team softball tournament with 8 teams coming from out of town, based on the Sport Tourism Canada averages, which varies from $75 to $125 per person. That's what is typically spent by visitors who come to a sport event from out of town. So between hotel, restaurants, gift shops, tours, and activities, they typically spend in the neighborhood of $100 per person. That represents anywhere from $20 to $40, maybe even $50,000 per tournament, times 10 tournaments. That's our goal. So between $250,000 and $500,000 that we would like to see as attracting to this facility. In terms of employment benefits, although this is we expect this to be approximately a 1-year project, according to 2009 CMHC report, it's almost a 1-to-1 ratio in terms of indirect jobs in the community that spin off from one construction job.
I have you down to 5 seconds, but if you need some more time, I can ask my colleagues if we can extend.
Thank you very
And
much.
I will, how much?
I'll try to wrap it within 2.
Okay, I need confirmation.
Sorry?
2/3 majority. All those in favor of extending? Opposed, if any? Thank you, sorry about that.
No problem at all. Much appreciated. Geez, I had this rehearsed down to 10 minutes. Indirect economic benefits. According to the Economic Benefits of Public Infrastructure Spending in Canada by the Broadband Institute, 2015, for every dollar of infrastructure spending, it's a $1.43 spin-off to the community. We're talking about $1 million plus that the government is going to be pouring into this operation, and so we're looking at between $1.4, $1.5 million in economic spinoff. So we have an architecturally pleasing amenity. It's valued within the community. The number of times that people speak so fondly about this place in terms of being part of the original volunteer groups that were involved, it's quite valued. It will also give us the opportunity to introduce summer programming, Pro D Day camps, and many of those other activities that the Pacific hat that I wear would rev up. In closing, I haven't even mentioned anything about Rowing Canada, but that's a significant part of this whole process. We had conversation with some of the architects and leadership from Rowing Canada. They require in excess of 10,000 square feet of space that they are not going to be able to put up at Quamachin Lake. And the Sportsplex is the destination for that building site. We're in conversation with them to see how we might be able to put these two projects together. Savings on heating and cooling, for example, right off the bat. One system, economies of scale. We expect that there's some real advantages that we have from this, and this project could be even much bigger than we originally anticipated. So the opportunity's here, the time's now, and I invite any and all the directors at any point in time, please come visit us. We'd love to show you around and toss around some more details, some of the ideas that we have going here. And if I can be so bold, please make the check out to Sportsplex, Cowichan Sportsplex. Thank you.
That was the Dragon Den pitch. Thank you very much. Director Morrison.
Thanks for the presentation. A quick question. Do you have any time pressure, timeline, deadline for commitment from this organization and your other funders?
I think that because it is so new, I mean, it's just 48 hours that we've been informed of this. I don't know if I can pin it down to an exact date. The conversation has been that we would like to break ground sometime in 2020. I believe it's the Strategic Investment Fund where there might be a source of dollars. So if those funds are available and we can do the deal now, then I think that would be certainly our preference.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Cooper.
Thank you.
Moving on, Ms. Legault.
Thank you. On to correspondence. Item C1, correspondence from Sandy McPherson, Earth Guardians, Cowichan Valley, with request for free student transit day passes for Global Climate Strike on September 20th, 2019.
And I believe Ms. McPherson is here, if you'd like to indulge her.
Thank you very much. But I'm here representing the Earth Guardians, and I really appreciate being here today. Thank you very much. A couple of points. You have my letter in front of you in your package, and the Earth Guardians is part of a global youth movement, and it has been going for over 20 years. The local one has been going for about 3.5 years, and I've been an adult mentor, a member of the Earth Guardians since their inception in the Cowichan Valley. As you're well aware, there has been a global climate strike called for September the 20th. That's a Friday. And the points that I want to make over and above the letter are that most of you represent youth, students in your constituency who would need some kind of transportation to and from, potentially, the Duncan City Square, because the Cowichan Valley Regional District is pretty far flung. So it came to light when I was at the Earth Guardians meeting last Friday evening that there are many parents who actually don't want their children to be riding the bus, which I thought was pretty enlightening. So I think there's potential for public relations there if there are concerns about safety. I don't know what their perceptions are, but this came from an Earth Guardian who rides the bus all the time to and from her part-time work, and she said, a lot of my friends' parents won't let them ride the bus. So to me, this is an opportunity to introduce these youth to riding the bus, take that conversation home to their parents, and who knows what might transpire from there. My request is pretty modest compared to the previous speakers, although I totally love what they're planning for the Sportsplex. But we're looking at potentially 100 tickets to be distributed to the schools that are the furthest away, like Lake Cowichan in your area, Chair McGonigal, and also Francis Kelsey School and Chemainus. And $225 would buy 100 tickets. And if the youth were not able to actually use them on that day, they could use them at a future time, as opposed to what I put in my letter, which was day passes. So I think the tickets could be a real plus. And although you could perhaps perceive that as lost revenue, I see it as future revenue, where we're introducing youth who perhaps don't ride the buses now, may in the future, because one of the huge emissions for greenhouse gases is transportation, as we know is close to 80% in the Cowichan Valley. So this is one way to make a tiny bit of difference. So I ask for 100 tickets, please.
Great.
For Friday, this September 20th. Thank you.
That is a little less of an ask than the previous speaker. You are correct. I have a Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. McPherson. It's not a lot to ask for, and to be quite honest, I don't see a problem with that at all. But I'm intrigued by the reasons why one of your people said they didn't like their children riding the bus. Did they expand on that as to why that might be?
It was interesting to me. I would really like to explore that further, because she literally said parents don't seem to mind if the children are at Tim Hortons as long as they know where they are. So I see it as they think of it as a safety and uncertainty from a parental perspective. And I think that there's quite a bit that we can do to rectify that misperception. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a surprise to me as well, because I would have thought that the buses were one of the safest places to be. I'll try and maybe take this up later on with the bus people themselves and see what we can find out.
Thank you.
So this is for direction, ladies and gentlemen. Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Ms. McPherson, I'd want to move the recommendation. And then I'd like to, there isn't a I recommend, so I can move the recommendation of 100 tickets to for the Earth Guardians for the September 20th.
You can do that, yes, absolutely.
And then I'd like to speak to it if there's a seconder.
Do I have a seconder? I do. And speak to it?
Thank you. Yes, I think, well, one thing that they did do with this presentation is they sent the #1 Earth Guardian. Because I've been watching you for years. You're on your bike, your sewing machines are packed with you. You are definitely represent an Earth Guardian. So I appreciate all of what you do in the community, because you really walk the talk or talk the walk or whatever. You're right there. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Yanni DiNardo.
Director Salmon, did you have a question?
Yes, I support this as well as a parent in Mill Bay with kids at Kelsey, and it'll be great not to have to drive, and it'll be appreciated by students down the south end. So.
Thank you very much, Director Salmon.
Director Stone.
Just a question through to staff about administrating it. Would it not be more effective just to offer free transit to youth on that day rather than 100 tickets? Because I noticed that Ladysmith Secondary wasn't mentioned, but there is a bus there that goes from Ladysmith directly into just the train station there. And I just think that from an administrative standpoint, how do we know how many tickets to give to each community? And really, if we're trying to encourage transit with youth, maybe a few youth would use transit, maybe not go to the climate strike. But again, if there's a double-edged thing here that we're trying to encourage use, I just wonder if it might be easier to administrate if we just offered free transit to youth on September 20th, and that would be another climate action initiative that we could get to encourage youth to use the buses. So I guess through to staff, what's easier to administrate? Are you going to be able to guess the right amount of tickets for each school, or?
Thank you. Hello, committee members. In regards to the particular request, I've spoken with Sandy, and she advised, an approximate number based on the number of attendees at the last one and expected numbers. We acknowledge that the transit, we try not to, in regards to your specific question, sorry, I'll address that, is for operations, we do try to limit sort of the discussion between the transit operator and the student who arrives on the bus. So administratively, it's not difficult for us to, by the direction of the committee, provide free transit tickets. We already have a program that's administered through the United Way in providing free tickets to different nonprofit agencies. But in regards to sort of a global free student day, an operational challenge might be in communicating that to the drivers when they encounter students, and are you a student? Do you need to show your ID card? All of those kind of things can be overcome, but by offering the tickets, it's simpler. And then, as Ms. McPherson mentioned, they can use them at another time as well. So.
And a follow-up, Director Stone.
So 100 tickets amongst 5 high schools hardly seems enough from that perspective. And if we put 20 tickets to each school, and Francis Kelsey has 110 kids that want to attend, then we run into that logistical challenge. So that's what I was trying to address. Is there a way that you provide 100 tickets per school and only the ones that are redeemed that day or something? Because I can't imagine that 20, how would you allocate X number of tickets to each school? So I just, logistically speaking, can't imagine how 100 tickets would be sufficient for 5 high schools. That I think the total population of those 5 schools is well over 2,500 kids. So just a thought. No, I'm also conscious of the cost, so I was just trying to say logistically how we would figure that out and actually make it effective, because we may find that you only get 3 students from one school and you want 50 at another, so how do you divvy up 100 tickets amongst 5 high schools with a population total of 3,000 or 4,000 kids?
Right now, the request is for 100 tickets, so I think it's at the discretion of the committee or Ms. McPherson if she'd like to request more or provide a different opportunity.
Great, I have a speakers list. Director Acton is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Although it sounds like that might be a little bit more logistically challenging to do the free day, to me that we're missing a big opportunity of really capitalizing on promoting some of the things that Ms. McPherson mentioned about taking the bus, about you taking the bus, and then our support also for what that day represents. So, and then by giving away 100 tickets or 200 and then trying to get them back, I don't think we're going to get kind of I think we have a real opportunity to really make a statement as to where we stand. We support our youth. We're supporting that direction and that thought, and that the youth are important in their future. So personally, I think if we can find a way to just blanket that day where youth show their student card, and if they don't have it with them, like, you can tell if somebody's 15 or 14. So
Present company excluded. Director Marsh.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was thinking similarly to Director Acton about student cards, but I also would like to inquire of, if I may, Mr. Chair, through you to Ms. McPherson, what ages does Earth Guardians identify as youth? And I just qualify that by saying there is a move in the community for homeless youth that includes kids up to 24 or 5, I believe. So what were you thinking only kids who were enrolled in school? What about youth who are homeschooling or are
Well-
19 and unemployed or?
Certainly. We are looking at youth who are enrolled in school or are homeschooled primarily,
may
or
I-
the ones who, because we want to assist youth to come from school or to go back to their school in order to be able to get the school bus home as much as we can.
So I've heard from our staff and the concern about the bus drivers. I'm wondering what would be easier, though, if you could get all the schools to know if the youth shows their school ID or the homeschooler some kind of thing that, if they're enrolled in a school, would that be work for you so that we wouldn't be limiting it to 100?
Certainly, that was our original request, and in discussion with Ms. Rondeau, and I can appreciate the challenge of each of the bus drivers, and truthfully, there aren't a lot of buses to and from the schools. That's another point to take up, but most of the youth, I think, are probably planning on on striking for the day, because it's going to be the majority of the afternoon. I mean, they're going to need to leave school in order to be there at the city square at noon. They're going to need to leave school by, 11:30, something like that, depending, or 11 o'clock, depending on when the buses are. So the more freedom that we can provide, the more latitude and flexibility, a day pass would be preferable.
Thank you. Director Sebring. Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm not seeing a lot of opposition around the table to this. I'm assuming that we're going to have to waive our normal policy as far as sending this directly to the board this afternoon or this evening. So I'm wondering if there's a way that we could, endorse the concept in principle, let Ms. McPherson and staff work out the details, and then bring a recommendation that everybody is happy with at the board that's going to cover off making sure that the most number of participants are able to participate, and then we can address this when we vote at the board this evening.
Thank you. Director Smith.
Through the chair to Ms. McPherson, have you spoken with the school board? And, the buses quite often leave the school empty in the morning to come back to Duncan. Have you had any conversations with them to see if that's a possibility of the students being loaded onto the buses to come in?
That's a great idea. We have not approached the school board. As I said, I'm a mentor, and this is really a youth-directed initiative. And so although a lot of teachers are on board with this, and even a couple of the principals are on board with this, the students, I'm gathering, haven't had a sense that there's total acceptance of this. So I think there's been some reluctance to approach the school board about this. But it's a great idea.
Thank you. Director Stone.
Well, that leads me to the next question. It is an instructional day, so would schools be within their rights to distribute tickets to kids to skip an instructional day of school? I don't think they would. So again, this goes back to the logistics of having a school hand out tickets for kids to skip school, maybe without their parents' knowledge or permission. There's many of these youth that are 13, 14 years old. I just think my thought was the first place to go would have been the school board at a business meeting to ask for their permission and support with the school buses, because then you're putting individual school administration into a position where without parents' permission, no parental consent form, schools would be distributing a transit pass to a child to skip an instructional day without the proper permission in place. And I know that schools cannot take a child off site without that parental permission form. And we are just a week and a couple days away from that date. The more sober thought there, I think it's a difficult position to put the regional district in to then say we are providing these tickets to the children to skip an instructional day without parental consent, and then putting the administration of the school into a position where they could, be in a difficult position by encouraging kids to leave the school property while they're under their care without parental consent. So I'm not sure if I could support that.
If I might, Chair McGonigal,
Absolutely,
respond to
ma'am.
that. On May the 17th, there were at least 300 youth in the city square in Duncan, and there were no repercussions following that around problems from the school or concerns expressed by the school. And I certainly hear your concern. And what I would say is that there were a number of teachers who accompanied students to the May 17th event, and I'm anticipating that that would happen again. And as far as handing the tickets out, it's not the school's responsibility. The Earth Guardian youth themselves take responsibility for handing out the tickets. So most youth, the conversations that they have within their household with their parents and guardians, I hear you about that. And any that come from further away are probably going to be from the high schools. They're not going to be from the elementary schools.
And a follow-up?
I just be clear, I said 13 years old and up.
Yeah.
But without parental consent.
Yeah.
And like I said, my son would have consent absolutely from us. But again, I just think if we wanted to do it, it's much cleaner to just say it's a free youth transit day.
Right.
Otherwise, we're getting ourselves where
Yeah.
we're facilitating. And if you have one parent that decides to sue the school board or the regional district for encouraging something, or something happens, a student doesn't get back on their bus home, I just think we're put in a difficult position. I'd rather just say it's a free transit day and that's supporting the climate initiative, but.
I completely agree with you.
Thank you. Director Coons next.
This started out with a relatively simple request, and as it happens so many times, we are making it more and more and more complicated because we're trying to get perfect. The way this discussion has been going, I am now I was going to support the initial request. I thought it was fairly simple, straightforward. Thinking about it now with all the issues coming up, I'm now dead against it. I think the CVRD should stay out of it. It's just that we've got enough stuff on our plate with legal aspects and whatnot, and I can just see something going wrong, and oh, well, it's so easy to sue the CVRD. Thank you very much. I would rather not.
Thank you, Director Kuhn. I have Director Yanni DiNardo.
I kind of feel the same way now, that it's a strike. I hear Director Stone's issues now. I'm a little uncertain too, but I'll just wait and hear. It's, really changed from my 100 tickets that I thought that the Youth Guardians would hand out, that would be their responsibility. I thought was simple enough, but I will wait and hear the rest if there's more.
Thank you. I have Director Acton for more.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To support what Director Stone had said at the end, where he would support the idea of having a free bus day for either youth or everyone, I'm not sure which one you said, but just in support of an Earth Day action, I would support that if, the problem is here now, we don't have a lot of time. It's only like 10 days away. So if the CVRD thinks that they could have enough time to kind of publicize it and we could kind of capitalize it as far as like marketing goes, instead of just doing it for the sake of it, then, I would support that. But I think it would have been a great initiative if we had some more time to really focus on it.
Director Marsh.
I liked Director Morrison's suggestion that staff and Ms. McPherson talk about it, and then maybe staff could give a recommendation to the board. I would hate for us to jump in to something that would backfire in a negative way, because none of us want that to happen. And I know that the Earth Guardians would not want that to happen either. I hope they wouldn't. But so I would just like to hear if there's any risk to allowing a free transit day for youth on a day that is a worldwide youth climate action day. My rebel says, let's do it, absolutely. But I also want to know if there's any risk at all before. So I move that we if we can.
There is a motion on the floor, so just
So
so
what
we're
is the
aware.
motion? The
The
100?
motion is for 100 tickets. If you'd like to move an amendment.
I would like to move an amendment, similar to what Director Morrison said, that we get a report tonight. We're going to, if we're going to let this happen, it
I
has to
think that's a
happen tonight.
totally different motion, so
Okay.
if we deal with a motion on the floor, if you wish to defeat it, then we can, excuse me, move forward,
Okay.
or whatever you're inclined to
So can we
do.
call the question on the motion?
If
on
we
the
are
floor?
ready, I have no more speakers. Are you ready for the question? Call the question. All those in favor of 100 tickets? Those opposed? I don't need to name them. It's unanimously opposed. Director Marsh,
So
you
if
had something further?
If I may, I'd like to move that this come back to the board this evening with some direction from our staff about anything that might not be a great, that would put us in jeopardy for it. I mean, I know we do free transit for youth at different times during the year. So I'm just not legally aware if this is going to cause any kind of a problem. And I certainly wouldn't want to cause any kind of a problem, so.
So I'm going to look to our corporate officer and ask if that would be direction to staff or simply a motion. How would we handle this?
I think at this point, staff need a little more clarity about what's expected for this evening.
I'll turn it over to Director Morrison because I think he has an idea.
Thank you. Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I haven't written it out, but I would move that, that the committee support in principle the establishment of free youth transit on that day, and that it be recommended to the board. Be recommended to the board that we offer free youth transit on
Friday, September 20th.
what she said, and that it be considered at this evening's board meeting.
Moved and seconded. Discussion on that? You'll be sure to hand that in on Director Morrison's behalf. I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? I have Director Smith, Director Kuhn, Director Sebring opposed. Thank you very much.
So I'm to return this evening then? Is that?
Or you can watch us live. Thank you very much. Ms. Legault?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's no items of information, so on to number 8, reports. Item R1 is a report from Facilities and Transit Division regarding the 2018-19 BC Transit Annual Performance Summary Report of the Cowichan Valley Transit Systems and comparative to peer systems. Recommendation is for information.
Director Stone?
Who's here to answer transit stuff? Anyway, I have a question, and I actually received an email about this, but I'm trying to square the information that I received via email. I've been informed that we don't have per route performance study analysis available. However, looking back at previous reports, we did have per route performance analysis and statistics provided to the board, and we made decisions based on that information. But I don't see per route statistics here, and I'm wondering how we choose to look at the effectiveness of different routes within the system if we don't have that detailed breakdown.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Stone. In regards to the particular question, I don't know what report you are formally referring to, but I do know several things about how we collect data on transit routes now and in the past. So in previous years, when we wanted to look at specific route ridership, we would hire people to survey, actually sample trips, and they would ride the bus and they would document, what stop had activity and how many people came on and how many people came off. And then we would report back on that through, if it was a service review, it would be included in a report. Some of our new buses have automated passenger counters, which are now being implemented and sampled, and they're kind of being fact-checked right now for accuracy. So there's several routes that are being sampled, and then over time, we're building more of a database in terms of the trends on each of the routes, and that will be useful in determining the number of riders per route and the times that they travel. That also, what that does is it counts the number of people getting on and off, so we can look at bus stops and adjudicate the infrastructure that's required at each of the stops as well. And then lastly, we can rely on the GFI, or what's called the cash box. And that is not a perfect system, but the drivers basically sort of code, you know, people coming on and people coming off and what kind of fare they're paying with. So I'm not sure specifically what report or information that you received was provided in the context to, whether it was, you know, provided years ago when Ladysmith was joining the service, or every year. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Follow
Yeah,
up?
appreciate it.
Thank you. So I'm just looking at the April 11th, 2018 staff report and the subsequent years prior to that. Per ridership data was included in those reports, and maybe they were focused on routes that we were trying to make adjustments to, so Ladysmith routes were there. That historical data has been used to justify our community's investment in transit over the years, and there's an appetite out there for a trend analysis of yearly performance. Up until April of 2018, we seemed to get some of that information on what seemed like an annual basis, and I had asked earlier this year why we haven't, you know, in July specifically, and then just more recently. And the information you just shared was the information I received via email, but then that makes me wonder and question the previous data that we were provided. It didn't seem to provide more detail and was easier to justify that we had achieved, for example, the Ladysmith route in the last analysis that was provided had achieved what we would consider sort of minimum ridership standards. And anecdotally, I see people on the bus, so it's no longer a ghost bus, so I think that's a good thing. But when you're asked by members of your community to justify the annual investment in transit, it's hard and to have a defensible position when our response to them is, sorry, we don't have any data, which in today's day and age, I understand the newer buses and such. But it seems interesting to me that a bus used on a specific route for an entire day, when the cash box is emptied, we wouldn't at least be able to track that data and get some somewhat accurate representation of the cost recovery on those routes. So I appreciate that, but it's just, it's disappointing from my perspective that we're not able to do route-based analysis, because that begs the question, then how do we make decisions about improvements or the opposite, retractions of service to different areas without, what we're being told now is without being able to have reliable data for any route at this point in time. So I guess that's just a statement, and it is a bit disappointing, because now I can't do that.
Absolutely. If you'd like to reply.
Thank you. Yes, no one wants good data more than myself and the staff in the Facilities and Transit Division. So I can certainly look into the April 11th, 2018 report to committee and sort of identify what the sources of the data were and see if we can identify a way moving forwards to put that into regular reports for review. But certainly, yeah, we do want data, and we want to know that it's accurate too. So I'd have to research that more and then report back to the committee if they're interested.
September 13th, 2017, that data was also broken down per route.
Okay.
So there is a consistency going back for as long as I've been on the board of per route information coming forward.
Thank you. Director Nicholson.
I'm wondering, is it possible to break down the ridership based on students versus, or youth versus adults?
For demographics?
For the conventional, yeah.
I would have to look into that as well. We did blend the products for the fares. So now when you buy a ticket, you would buy it on, the tickets that people buy are student and adult is $2.25, but there is a discount on the pass for students. So I can certainly look into that. I know in our previous meeting when we had a report done by Energy, they were a public consultation firm. They had sampled 400 people and, you know, questioned them, and they have some statistics on demographics in terms of who reported that they were using the transit system. So that was at our last committee meeting.
A follow-up?
Well, I'm just thinking that, you know, looking, I suspect our buses drive around with empty seats quite a lot. And I really appreciated the previous presentation about trying to encourage youth to start using the bus. So this is a long-term thing. It's like developing a habit. So I'm just wondering if we should be thinking about maybe doing more free transit for youth, and if there would be, how much of a revenue impact that would be.
There's certainly options to explore. BC Transit has a number of programs that they, you know, provide or have worked with the school on. So, for example, we're looking at developing more the Kids Ride the Bus program, which is from a kindergarten to grade 5 youth group in schools. So that's a program that we can promote more. I think as a whole, our preference would be to develop a communications and marketing and engagement strategy overall if we're looking at free transit use. Maybe not so much sort of ad hoc, but think about sort of what our outcomes are and what our objectives are and who we're trying to reach, so it's a bit more targeted. But certainly BC Transit has a number of programs, as well as you know, the CVRD is always looking to promote transit in the region, so we'd definitely be open to ideas. With regards to your last point, we do have a free transit policy, and I'm sorry I didn't bring this to your attention earlier when we were discussing the Earth Guardians request, but the policy right now outlines a number of days that transit is free, and that's, you know, the federal election day, as well as November 11th for veterans. So there are certain days, and we could bring that policy up for review as well if we wanted to expand the number of free transit days, or so I'd appreciate that maybe as a second, like, make sure that if that's going to be a staff direction, if you could note what your expectation is in terms of bringing that back.
Thank you. I have Director Morrison next.
Thank you. Very interesting report, and I'm interested in it from a couple of perspectives. In that I've seen a few of reports like this and similar reports, and they're not always as positive as far as our ridership goes and our cost recovery goes and the like. So I'm somewhat pleased with this, and I hope it's a trend that continues. We've noted over the time that I've been here that quite often our fortunes rise and fall with the price per liter of fuel at the pumps, and so it's been a little higher lately, and maybe more people are riding. But I think there's another perspective here that we should be contemplating when we're talking budget and the likes is yeah, maybe staff haven't done as much of the data collection and analysis that we would like and that may be helpful in making decisions. But I think we will see increased pressure to increase the service and the availability and the effectiveness. Just in a letter to the editor in the paper today, there's suggestions that regional transit needs to be a more developed area for greenhouse gas reduction and climate change. And I think we're on the cusp of not only that idea of encouraging youth to use it and to become accustomed to use it, but also that it be a service that is effective and that people can rely on. And I think we've done some good work in the past, but I think there's going to be an increased increased demand for us to be providing maybe more service hours and that greater connectivity. And I will mention, I think we have to get interregional and connect with our friends to the north at Nanaimo. So I thought the report was good. It was a snapshot in time as far as our numbers are up, and I hope it continues. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further on the report? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Legault.
Thank you. Item R2, report from the Parks and Trails Division regarding a proposed subdivision and park dedication requirements in electoral area B. And the recommendation for consideration is that it be recommended to the board meeting on September 11th, 2019, that the requirement for 5% park dedication under Section 510 of the Local Government Act for the proposed 5-lot subdivision of Lot 26, District Lot 201, Malahat District Plan VIP 78459, PID 026-226-537 in electoral area B, Shawnigan Lake, be waived.
Director Stone. Thank you, Director Acton. Microphone.
Thank you. I'd like to move to deny this request, and I could speak to that if I have a seconder.
Okay, it's moved and seconded, and you'd like to speak to that?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Previously, we had a public member comment on this report, and they are correct. I have also spoken to 3 previous commission members, and they have relayed the same information that what's in this report, that the park dedication was intended, is not true. So I'd like for this applicant to just go through the regular process of a subdivision.
Okay, anything further? Absolutely, Director Stone.
So I understand that park dedication is based on total land mass. They've dedicated just under 52 acres of a 900-plus acre subdivision, which is 5% of the total land mass. So how you could ask for an additional 5% out of every subsequently subdivided parcel, I'm not quite understanding. So when I read the report, it was 51, you add up the hectares, it's 52 acres has been dedicated. It was stated by the public member here that it was a 900-plus acre subdivision, which would be 5%. So I'm just wondering if there was a expectation for a 5% of a total land mass to be dedicated as park, and that has been dedicated according to the staff report, why there would be an expectation that at every subsequent subdivision into smaller parcels that another 5% would have to get added. So then it would essentially make it 10% of the total land mass over town. I wasn't there, so I'm just trying to get some clarity.
No, for sure. Thank you. Mr. Farquhar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe a bit of clarification. With the original rezoning application, it involves several parcels of land that collectively came forward with a rezoning proposal that ultimately was approved by the board at the time. So you're correct in terms of the zoning bylaw requirements at the time provided for the dedications that occurred. The property that's before you right now is a separate parcel. There has been no previous subdivision of that parcel, so there has not been a previous condition with respect to Section 510 of the Local Government Act for park dedication. Hence, it's before the committee for consideration.
Thank you, that makes more sense.
Okay. Anyone further on this? Director Nicholson, sorry.
I would just like to ask through you to staff about other amenity contributions and what the expectation was.
Director, I demoted you. I'm
Thank you,
very
Mr. Chair.
sorry, Mr. Farquhar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, there were several amenities for related to parks and trails that were put forward at the time. Those are covered off by a restricted covenant. The lands that were covered off in the covenant per the rezoning have been provided. The remaining ones are inclusive of a washroom, picnic shelter, and parking. However, those were tied primarily to subsequent subdivision of the development, so it's still at its very early stages. I think it's sort of the initial hamlet is still in the stages of subdivision, but there's a number of additional lots that the zoning provides for that have not been created, so The regional district still holds the big stick in terms of those remaining commitments that are tied to the overall property. So it was too early in terms of the hamlet to see the development of the washroom building and the parking area. So those are still required, and under the zoning and the restricted covenant, we still hold those requirements as part of any future further subdivision of those lands.
Hope that answers. Anything further? Yes, Director Salmon.
Yes, thank you. Just knowing a little bit about Elkington, it could be many decades into the future before we get the covered washroom, picnic shelter amenities that are promised. So I'd just like to support Director Atkin and ask for the usual 5% for this separate parcel and against this recommendation. Thank you.
Anything further? So the recommendation is to deny. I'll call the question. All those in favor of denial? Opposed? Okay, it is denied. And it will be moved to the board. Yes, thank you. Ms. Legault.
Thank you. Item R3, report from the Parks and Trails Division regarding BC MOTI agreement for community pathway on Pine Street, electoral area C, Cobble Hill. And the recommendations that it be recommended to the board that an agreement with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to permit construction and maintenance of a community connector trail on the undeveloped Pine Street Road right-of-way in electoral area C, Cobble Hill, be approved.
Moved by Director Yanni DiNardo. Seconded Director Wilson. Did I see your hand? Any discussion on this? Call the question. All those in favor? I'm sorry, Director Nicholson. Yes, I apologize. I didn't see your hand.
My question is about staff capacity and work plans. And I know that there's lots of projects that are in community parks and trails that are very valued in the community. And I'm wondering when we're going to have an opportunity to look at what the priorities are going to be. So we approve this, so I don't know whether approving this means it bumps up to the top of the list or where it sits with all the other work that has been approved in the past.
Thank you. Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This particular trail is tied in with an application for by Mr. Gordon Smith, Clement Centre and Couch and Woodworking, which runs alongside that particular area. He's very community minded. He has indicated that he's quite willing to actually take on the work of building that trail and maintaining it as part of the ongoing application when and if it's approved.
Thank you. Yes, Director Nicholson.
It's not my intention to scuttle this particular proposal, but I know that we have a lot of projects that we're interested in getting done, and staff capacity is limited, and we have a lot of gas tax money as well. So I'm just wondering when we'll be able to take a look at a work plan that provides us with an opportunity to talk about priorities among different projects.
Thank you. Mr. Farquhar.
Mr. Chair, as a friendly reminder to the committee, back in July, a detailed list was brought of all the current 2019 work plan priorities that the Parks and Trails Division is endeavoring to complete over the year. It also included kind of a quarterly. We can certainly bring to the next meeting an update for the committee as to how we've endeavored to accomplish those things that were presented to the committee based on the budget that was approved for this year and other priorities that have been identified by the committee. So those can be considered. The other key thing is as we move into the 2020 budget year, as staff will certainly be looking for the committee and board's direction on establishing priorities for community and regional parks for the various electoral areas and regional parks as part of the budget process. So we'll bring a report back further to what was presented in July.
Final follow-up?
Thank you. I would appreciate getting a report. I think I must have missed that July meeting.
Okay, thank you. Look forward to that as well. So call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Thank you. None opposed. Carries. Ms. Legault.
Item R4, a report from the Parks and Trails Division regarding easement request for BC Hydro Services through proposed parkland at 1590 Cowichan Bay Road, and the recommendation for consideration that it be recommended to the board on September 11th, 2019, that the request for a BC Hydro aerial easement, inclusive of other services across lands to be dedicated to the regional district as fee simple parkland as part of the proposed subdivision at 1590 Cowichan Bay Road, be denied.
And that's moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director Acton. Discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? That is denied. Ms. Legault, to go to the board.
Thank you, Chair. Item R5, report from the Parks and Trails Division, requisition limit increase for Function 236, Electoral Area F, Cowichan Lake South, Scotts Falls Community Parks. And the recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that CVRD bylaw number 2676, Electoral Area F, Community Parks Service Establishment Bylaw 2005, be amended to increase the maximum annual requisition limit from 35 cents per thousand net taxable value to 43 cents per thousand net taxable value.
Moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. Any discussion? Director Morrison.
Just very briefly, as the report indicates, the last time the maximum requisition was increased was '07. My Parks Commission has been engaging in some significant capital project recommendations. We've just completed Honeymoon Bay. We're looking at Missachi Lake and possible some trail connections and the like. So not to say that we anticipate a large requisition increase, but the capacity to be able to engage in some of those things will be helpful, and we're going to be meeting with Commission soon for 2020 budget planning, and to be able to have this done would be very helpful.
Thank you very much. Anything further? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Ms. Legault.
Item R6 is a report from the Parks and Trails Division regarding 2020 Community Resiliency Investment Program, Fire Smart Community Funding and Supports Program grant funding. The recommendation for consideration is that it be recommended to the board meeting on September 11th, 2019, that an application be submitted to the Ministry of Forests, Lands, Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development, Fire Smart Community Funding and Support Program for a $150,000 grant to fund a training program, the development of fuel management prescription plans, and to complete fuel management treatments as outlined in the Parks and Trails Division staff report dated August 28th, 2019.
Moved by Director Wilson, seconded Director Acton. Question, Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious what that $150,000 would really do, because it sounds a little, it's not telling me a lot in the description what kind of work would be done and how that would be spent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Last year, we had, we put in a grant application to do 10 prescriptions, fuel management prescriptions, and we actually received the funding. So right now, we have an RFQ out to hire a contractor to do these prescriptions. So in this next level of grant application, we need to do the treatments of those 10 parks that are having the prescriptions done now. So in this grant application, we're applying for funding to do fuel management treatments for these 10 parks that we're doing the plans for now. We're also found 3 more parks that we're looking at doing some more plans on, the fuel treatment plans, fuel management plans. Treatment is when you're actually going out on the site and you're cutting down the limbs, you're pulling stuff out of the bush to prevent fire from spreading from a park into residential area. So we're looking at the buffers between the parks and the homes. So the funding for this year would be for doing the actual treatments of these 10 parks, would be for doing 3 more fuel management prescription plans for 3 additional parks, and also working with the Public Safety Division to actually go out there and do some training for staff as well as the fire departments.
Okay, anyone, anything further? You're very welcome. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion carries. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Chair. Item R7 is a director's report from Director Smith regarding Municipal Insurance Association of BC Associate Member Program Service Provider Agreement between the CVRD, and I'll note a correction to the name of the community organization, Saltair Association for Local Teamwork. And the recommendation for consideration is that it be recommended to the board meeting on September 11th, 2019, that the Municipal Insurance Association of British Columbia Service Provider Agreement between the CVRD and Saltair Association for Local Teamwork, with the date to be set out in the service provider agreement, be approved. 2, that $25,000 deductible be covered by the CVRD. And 3, the term of the service provider agreement be continuous.
Director Smith, you're moving that. Do I have a seconder? Director Wilson, would you like to speak to that? I have Director Smith first.
Thank you very much. You've seen me before you a few times with regards to working through some changes that have occurred in Saltair and under the electoral area parks commissions. Throughout the years, for multiple years, the commission has hosted and sponsored different events in Saltair. The Easter and the Halloween are traditional. Unfortunately, when it came to light that the CVRD's insurance no longer covered these events, it became possible for a group to step in and be created. So I applaud the residents in Saltair that have worked very, very hard to create this new group, the Saltair Association for Local Teamwork, to start sponsoring and hosting these events. Currently, they're looking just to sponsor and host the Saltair Easter event, the Saltair Days, and the Halloween event. Director Stone has been very generous in helping me out with sorting through how Ladysmith has worked through their events through this same service provider agreement for many of their events, their Ladysmith Days, their Festival of Lights, and their Ladysmith Ambassador and other programs that they have. So I'd like to thank Director Stone for all his assistance as we've worked through this. I'm very pleased to bring this before you today so that we can move on as a community, make our community more livable. It has a history, and we'd like to continue that history. And I ask for your support today. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Director Kuhn first.
When my organization in UBO tried that, it didn't work. They were told, no, you better form an association and apply and get liability insurance and pay it yourself. And so I'm kind of surprised that this request even comes forward, because we tried that and we were denied, basically. So we've gone through the hoops, and the UBO Community Association has their own liability insurance now for events, and I can't see why we now should make an exemption in this case, and that even the CVRD would cover the $25,000 deductible. I can't see why we should be doing that. I mean, if we consider that, then it should be considered for all organizations in each area. But to have one, yes, okay, we'll cover that by MIA, and we'll even offer to cover the deductible, and yet others had to go through the hoops and organize it all themselves, and we did that in UBO. So I can't be in favor of that, sorry.
Thank you. Director Stone, you're next.
Yeah, and I thank you to Director Smith for the credit, but in all honesty, this came from our staff, and I'm not sure. Frankly, I don't know if we would cover a deductible for a claim, so I'd have to check with our staff. But as far as the insurance goes, it did require that these either be a charitable organization or association or a nonprofit, and the MIA would, based on an application to have that coverage, would provide it or not. You know, in terms of the tactical particulars, my understanding, from what I understand though, is that the deductible would need to actually be covered by the group, but I didn't know it was that high. So I'm just wondering, based on that, it says deductible covered by the CVRD. That would be per incident. So if something happened and 5 people got injured and there was 5 claims, that would be $125,000. Yeah, I'm just wondering where it comes from, because it says by the CVRD. So would that be the local area, or is that would be expected to come from like general government or something?
Mr. Carruthers, I think, has a response. Or?
Do you want to take that, Talitha?
So direction would be sought from the board with respect to that, if that was something that the board wished to pursue. It is a very real concern that staff do have with respect to this request. The function itself does not have sufficient funds to support a $25,000 deductible. So that would be the community parks function for Area G.
Thank you. Director, does that suffice, Director Stone? Director Morrison.
Yeah, that was essentially my question, as well as that my community has availed themselves of the services of MIA, and when events happen either in our local community hall or our park, that function has to cover the portion of that deductible. And I think in the case of this is going outside our normal way of doing business, and I think there would have to be significant dollars held in reserve for coverage of a deductible, because it would not fall. I don't think any of the directors around the table would want to be in a position of their tax requisition going into covering off claims in another jurisdiction that's the subject of a sort of an exception to the way we normally operate. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Wilson, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I get quite frustrated when I hear about liability all the time. Everybody's so scared of doing anything that we won't do anything at all. And yeah, there's a liability question here, but let's start saying what we can do. I've heard the word can't and the term we can't so many times since I came to this table. I've hardly heard the term let's see what we can do. So rather than create an exception, and I'm sorry that other people have had to create their own associations and all the rest of it. So rather than saying, well, let's make an exception here, let's create a precedent and work with the communities and figure out what they need from us. And yeah, there's going to be maybe a claim, but really, is it going to happen every week? I doubt it.
Thank you. Director Stone, you had another one?
Yeah, so we are in the business of managing risk and liability. When we get elected, that's our responsibility. So these questions come up, and I wish I had more information to understand, you know, what is available, because I think it should be, if we're going to do it, a universal opportunity for community groups. And what I understood was that the liability insurance was prohibitive cost for community groups, and this was a way to facilitate some kind of a you know, a more affordable opportunity for them to receive insurance, but without proper report, and this isn't an indictment of Director Smith, but information from staff that says, if you adopt this as a global policy, this is what you'll enable, and this is the cost, and this is the risk, and then managing that risk, because the reality is, knock on wood, that hopefully we don't have any claims, right? But it would be nice to be able to make an informed decision, and then have, you know, a specific policy in place that benefits everyone. So I feel like I'm a little bit of a loss of what the broader context might look like to make it available to all that would want to access it. Anyway.
Director Sebring.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my only question, and I I totally support the idea behind this, but again, you know, I come to unintended consequences, and we don't know what those are at this point. I guess I would ask through you to Director Smith, the last line of the thing here says MIABC has confirmed that the use of their associate member program is appropriate for the Saltair Association for Teamwork. I'm not sure what that means. I mean, based on what we're hearing from Director Kuhn and Director Stone, a specific application needs to be made. The organization needs to be some kind of a legal entity, a nonprofit or something that's incorporated. Have we gone all the way down that rabbit hole to determine whether when the application is made it'll happen, or is this just a generic endorsement that says it's appropriate for a group like the Saltair Association for Teamwork?
Response, Director Smith.
Through the chair to Director Sebring, I've gone through all of it with the MIABC, and they investigated to make sure that the society qualifies under this program, and they qualify under this program. I wouldn't have brought it forward unless they qualified for this program.
I'm just not
So
sure what
this
appropriate
program
meant.
is set up by MIABC. It's an associates member program. It's a service provider agreement, and it is something that is available. And I agree, we should be pursuing how does this work. I mean, if the town of Ladysmith is using it, then we need to also look at the possibilities of using it. The cost per year for this society to have this insurance is $250, and it will cover all three of those events. And that includes the fireworks, because Ladysmith has fireworks during their Ladysmith days, and I checked to make sure that it would also cover for us.
Thank you.
Follow-up, sir?
The follow-up, if I might, through you to Director Stone. I mean, the reference here is made to the town of Ladysmith, and I heard you say you're not exactly sure what the specifics of that are as far as the deductible and those kind of things. What do we know about that in terms of the precedent that does appear to exist?
Yeah, and I got to be honest, I asked our staff and they're looking into it. My understanding was that, and frankly, I didn't realize the deductible was so high. That the deductible, my understanding would be covered by the association, but I don't have that information, so I can't really answer it. It may be that the town decided that they would accept the risk, and maybe reevaluate it if it ever came to pass that we had a claim and it cost us. And like I said, I get the sentiments of what Director Wilson said, and I absolutely believe that, because I know that we had a difficult few discussions around the council table in 2015-16 when this came forward, because we did get an appeal from community groups saying, well, we can't do Festival of Lights anymore because we can't afford the insurance, and this is the solution that was come up with. It may have been that it was accepted at that time that absorbing the risk of the deductible was worth it to keep those events in our community. But I keep looking at my phone because I'm hoping that our CAO will send me a message to give us more information. I would be okay to support this going to the board for consideration, and maybe being able to find out some of that information during the interceding time. I can't give you any more
I
information.
think I have staff with a response here if you just want to
But you're saying
hold
to the
that.
board tonight or in 2 weeks?
Well, yeah. Oh, I'll have information before tonight's board meeting.
All right.
I have staff with a response to that. Talitha?
So different organizations, different local governments have different deductibles. $25,000 is the CVRD's deductible for these types of items. Just a note to the committee, what the recommendation is that we enter into a service provider agreement. So essentially this is saying that the SALT organization is providing a service on behalf of the Cowichan Valley Regional District. And so that's the agreement that we would be entering into if this were to go forward. And so then the committee may wish to consider what that would mean for other organizations throughout the regional district that would also come forward with the same thing, and how How those would be judged, as Director Kuhn noted, if you approve it for one, you approve it for all. So there are some, while I definitely see the desire to move forward with a function like this, it might be good to look at the full ramifications in light of the CVRD as a whole.
Thank you, and I think that's important to note that each municipality or regional district has a different deductible. And for instance, the town of Ladysmith, from MIA.
If I may, the service provider agreement from MIABC that was just sent by staff has a line in it that says the service provider agrees to be responsible for any and all deductible amounts, including claim expenses incurred by policy permission payments and policy, sorry, I'll zoom in here, I need glasses, policy premium payments. The local government reserves the right to terminate the agreement and associated general liability insurance coverage, et cetera, et cetera. So it actually is in the service provider agreement from MIA, according to our staff. It says, and this is just a snapshot from the agreement, the service provider agrees to be responsible for any and all deductible amounts, including any claim expenses incurred and policy premium payments. So I'm not sure we have the flexibility within that. Yeah, this is from the MIA service provider agreement.
Okay, thank you. Director Morrison?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I agree with a lot of what's been said, and yes, let's forge a new path, but in order to forge a new path and be precedent-setting, I want to make sure that I've got the full and clear details from our staff's perspective, so I would move this be referred to staff for clarification and report back to committee.
So motion to refer, seconded. On the propriety of referral, please. Director Nicholson on the referral.
I would like staff to look at the options, not just this particular option, this particular approach, so that I understand what the options are and the pros and cons of the options.
Okay, so noted. Okay, on referral, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Director Smith is opposed. That is referred. Ms. Legault.
Thank you.
Director Smith?
So that we can move along, I have sent everyone the information that I was sent from MIABC, so that everybody has a copy of that provider agreement. So I just want everyone to know, if you've heard the beep in a few minutes, it was.
Thanks. There will be dings coming on our electronic devices. Silent dings. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Chair. Item UB1, report from the Parks and Trails Division regarding Shawnigan Lake Village Area Parks Playground Review Assessment, and the recommendation for consideration that it be recommended to the board meeting on September 11th, 2019, that 1, the recommendations contained in the Electoral Area B Shawnigan Lake Village Area Park Playground Review 2019 report to the September 11th, 2019 Community Services Committee meeting be endorsed, and 2, the following projects be funded from the remaining capital funds allocated for playground replacement in the 2019 budget for Function 232 Shawnigan Lake Community Parks. A, $15,000 for installation of playscape-oriented improvements at Gallen Park. B, $20,000 for replacement of the existing playground with playscape, naturescape-oriented improvements at Old Mill Park. And C, $14,725 for picnic area and accessibility improvements at Old Mill Park.
Director Acton?
I would like to move that, and I also have an amendment to attach to the, as
Okay, do you want to add the amendment
and it's in
before?
front of everyone, that the Old Mill Park project commence while community engagement with the Gallen neighborhood is undertaken to develop ideas for the Gallen Park project. And this is so that so that parks can continue to work on Old Mill Park as they had started and had to stop for
So
this
you're
project.
moving that as D to that.
Thank you.
Seconded. Any discussion on that? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carries. Thank you. Ms. Legault. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. On the main motion,
Yes.
Director Morrison.
My question through to staff, as much as what Director Nicholson had raised, are we, by approving this resolution, affecting any of the 2019 work plan priorities for parks?
Mr. Farquhar.
Mr. Chair, as this was identified in the 2019 budget to undertake replacement of playground equipment in Shawnigan Lake, it's all part of our work plan for this year.
Thank you. Anything further? Okay, I'll call the question on the main motion then, as amended. Thank you for your encouragement. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries, thank you. No new business, Ms. Legault?
None.
And next is question period. Any questions from the gallery? Wow. I think he's saving it for the board, aren't you? No closed session? Move to adjourn. Director Morrison, seconded by everybody else. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Thank you very much.